السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قال: وكذلك أجرة الحصاد والرفاع والدياس والتذرية عليهما بالحصص، فإن شرطاه في المزارعة على العامل فسدت. وهذا الحكم ليس يختص بما ذكرنا من السورة، وهو الانقضاء المدة، والزرع لم يدرك، بل هو عام في جميع المزارعات.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، والحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. اللهم اللهم ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير، وبك نستعين يا فتاح يا عليم. ونور قلوبنا بمعرفتك، واشرح صدورنا بنور كتابك وسنة نبيك، واحفظنا أن زلنا من خطأ في بيان مرادك. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم، وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. We now come to the concluding section on Kitab al-Muzara'a. So the question arises that after the crops have grown and it has matured, it has been harvested. So now what? Understand? Do they take it as is in a particular state, or does it need to be processed? If it does need to be processed, then whose responsibility and whose duty, whose job is it to process it? Take it to the milling, have it grinded into flour, put into sacks, transport, and all their stories. So that's what he's discussing now. قال إمام كدور رحمة الله says نفع الله بعلومه وعلوم مشايخنا وأساتذتنا وجميع أوليائه والصالحين وبكم آمين. وكذلك أجرة الحصاد والرفع والدياس والتذرية عليهما بالحصص، فإن شرطاه في المزارع على الآمل فسدت. And in the like manner, any payment or remuneration for the hasad, for having it harvested, warafa, and having it taken away to the mill. What dias means to have it the thrashing process crushed, when it's crushed. What tadriya, and then separated, where the seeds are separated from the chaff, is separated from the rest of the of the stalk. You following?
Yeah.
Right, so the harvesting, the threshing, the separating, alayhima, all of this will be upon both of them, the laborer and the landowner. Both partners are responsible for the payment, if any, of these things. How much must they each pay? Bil hisasi, according to their share of the ownership. So if it was 60-40, whoever gets 60%, he must pay 60% of that cost. And whoever's getting the 40%, you pay 40% of the cost. فَإِنْ شَرَطَاهُ. Now, if they stipulate it upon any one person, then what happens? فَإِنْ شَرَطَاهُ. If they both make it conditional, meaning that they both agreed, that they're happy with this, that they both made it conditional في المزارعة على العامل. Then, but at the beginning of the transaction, they made it a condition, a clause in the transaction, that this will be the responsibility of the laborer only. Then fasadat. This is a sharti fasid. The shart which they have stipulated has made the transaction fasid. Right? Most of the time, sharti fasid comes about where one of the two partners is unfairly benefiting, and the transaction, whatever transaction it is, the transaction itself does not demand or does not allow for such a condition. Okay, so the transaction does not allow for such a condition, and in most cases, is giving one person unfair advantage or benefit over the other. ففسد. وهذا الحكم ليس بمختص بما ذكره من السورة وهو انقضاء المدة. We discussed three conditions of what happens once the transaction comes to an end, either by the death of one of the two partners, or by the transaction becoming fasq, or by the time period expiring. So Imam Sahib Hidaayah, Imam Marghinai says that this particular masala is not specific to this last surah, to this last scenario which he just mentioned now. What is the last scenario? It was laws with regards to the expiry of the transaction. So although this masala is coming at the end of that, it's not specific to the third one only, but it refers to all the scenarios of Muzara. Okay? It's a general ruling of Muzara. وانقضاء المدة وزرع لم يدرك. The last scenario was where which we discussed prior to this was the expiry of the term of the contract while the crops had not yet ripened, had not yet reached maturity. بل هو عام في جميع المزارعات. Rather, this masala is applicable in general to all types of muzara, to all scenarios of muzara sahiha, obviously. ووجه ذلك, what is the reason for this? Why does it become fasid? أن الأقدار يتناهى بتناهي الزرع, because as we mentioned before, as soon as the crops come to an end, as soon as it's grown and it reaches a stage of maturity where it's ready to be harvested, the contract ends automatically with that. You follow? While لحصول المقصود, because the objective of the contract of the partnership has been reached. So once the objective has been attained, there is no reason to maintain the partnership. فيبقى مال مشترك بينهما. So now this wealth, which is the crops, is wealth which is, or it is an asset which is shared between these two people. Okay. And remember before we did it, anything, all liabilities accrues to both partners. So because this is now an asset which is shared between the two, wala aqda, and there's no transaction between the two at that as things stand, فَيَجِبُ مُؤُونَةُ عَلَيْهِمَا. So therefore, any responsibilities or liabilities, mu'una means a difficulty, right? Responsibilities. Any responsibilities or liabilities is compulsory upon both of them. وإذا شرط في العقد ذلك, or شرط, and if that is stipulated as a clause in the transaction, ولا يقتضي, whereas the transaction does not demand, does not lend itself to such a clause, to such a condition, وفيه منفعة لأحدهما, and in that condition, in that shart, in that clause, there is benefit to one person. One person is unilaterally benefiting. It's not a bilateral benefit, it's not a mutual benefit, but only one person is getting an unfair advantage over the other. It will lead to the spoiling of the transaction, to the nullification of the transaction. You follow? كشرط الحمل والطحن على العامل. Just like how if they were to stipulate transport and the grinding process upon the amil, upon the labor. And there's two things as well. So if the landowner said, no, you're responsible for transport costs to the mill and back to me, so in its process state, and similarly you're responsible for the grinding of it, the milling of it. So that will also be a sharatul fasid. However, وعن أبي يوسف رحمه الله أنه يجوز. Imam Yusuf رحمه الله say this is permissible. إذا شرط ذلك على العامل للتعامل اعتبارا بالاستثناء. If that has been made conditional upon the amil, and if it has been stipulated as a clause upon the laborer, then this will be permissible. Why? للتعامل, because this is common practice. Making qiyas upon istisna. In istisna, that is the case. Understand, transport cost, and that is upon the person making the thing. Understand, it's usually included in the cost. Understand, of the. So basically what's happening here is that these kind of things will depend upon the urf, will depend upon ta'amul. In your era, in the place that you are living in, and the time and era that you are living in, what is the common practice in such matters? Okay. So the whatever is common practice that will basically be given, that is the side that the Sharia will lean upon, of permissibility or impermissibility. In your town and in your area, if that is normal for the worker, it's understood that the worker will do those tasks, then it's permissible. And if in your town, in your area, that's not part of the laborer's job, then it won't be permissible. You follow? Because from the beginning, the laborer is aware that all of these things, all of these jobs, all of these chores are mine. Okay? So because of that, he's already going into the job knowing, without even it having to be said, that this is part of my duties. وهو اختيار مشايخ البلخ, and this is the choice, the preferred masala of the ulama of Balkh. قال شمس الأئمة السرخسي رحمه الله تعالى هذا هو الأصح. This is the most correct opinion and view في ديارنا, in our town, in our cities, في ديارنا, in our country. فالحاصل, so in short, in brief, أن ما كان من عمل قبل الإدراك كالسكي والحيث فهو على عامل. In brief, whatever work there is prior to the crops becoming ripened and matured, right? Whatever work there is which is prior to the crops becoming ripened, such as irrigation, protection, فهو العامل, that is the responsibility and the duty of the laborer. That's number one. وما كان منه بعد الإدراك قبل القسمة فهو عليهما. And whatever jobs and responsibilities there is after maturity, after it has ripened, prior to division, prior to them taking their shares, فهو عليهما, this is the duty and responsibility of each one of them. Okay? So up to it becoming ripened, whatever jobs is entailed there, that is the laborer's responsibility. After it has become ripened, before it has been divided and given to each partner their shares, responsibility of both. And the third thing, في ظاهر الرواية فهو عليهما في ظاهر الرواية. According to the riwayat, it's the responsibility of both of them. كالحصاد, such as حصاد, the harvesting, والدياس, the threshing, وأشباهها, etc. على ما بينا, as we already discussed, meaning above. وما كان بعد القسمة, third thing, وما كان بعد القسمة, whatever duties and responsibilities they are after the division of the assets, فهو عليهما, this is also upon both of them. Okay, such as transport in it. والمعاملة على قياس هذا ما كان قبل إدراك الثمر من السقي والتلحيف والحيث فهو للعامل. And a common practice is upon this qiyas as well. And in all three, in what the three things we just mentioned now, the common practice is upon this qiyas as well. ما كان قبل إطلاق, from now he's discussing musaqat here, right? The same thing will apply, in other words, the same thing will apply to before the ripening of the fruit, whatever duties and responsibilities there are before the ripening of fruit, although that will be discussed in the next kitab al-Musaqat. I mean, in the case of fruit-bearing trees, now we move them away for crops, muzara, such as the irrigation. Talqih again means the what you call this, talqih. It's the same meaning, but different words are used in the case of fruit. So talqih will mean what you call this, where they join one root to the other root to make it grow. Sorry, pollination, cross pollination, right?
Irrigated. Okay.
cross pollination وحفظ protection and so forth فهو العامل. This is upon the work of the, so all the things that is required for the fruit, for the tree to bear fruit, this will be the responsibility of the laborer. وما كان بعد الإغراء, whatever is after the fruits have ripened, كالجداد, the cutting of the fruit. الجداد is the same as حصاد ومزارع والحفظ and protection. فهو عليهما, it is the duty and responsibility of both of them. ولو اشترط الجداد للعامل, if the cutting of the crops, the, what do you call it? In the case of fruit, we say, what do we say? Also harvesting. We also say harvesting, cutting, whatever, right? If the cutting of the fruit is upon the laborer, لا يجوز بالاتفاق, this will not be permissible by consensus. لأنه لا عرف فيه, because there's no urf in this, there's no common practice amongst the people with regards. Others, the people in their times never regarded this to be the duty and responsibility of the laborer when it comes to fruit-bearing trees, going to cut the fruit off the tree, pluck the fruit, whatever the word is. وما كان بعد القسمة, the third thing, whatever is after the distribution of the shares, فهو عليهما, is the responsibility and duty of both of them, such as transport and so forth. Transport and delivery and that. لأنه مال مشترك ولا عقد, for the same reason mentioned above, that this is a shared asset and there is no transaction which exists at that moment. ولو شرط الحصاد, going back now to مزارع, ولو شرط الحصاد في الزرع على رب الأرض لا يجوز بالإجماع. So that was all if the condition was upon the laborer. What if the condition was upon the landowner? If the harvesting of the crops, if it was made conditional, a clause in muzara'a, in crop sharing, upon the landowner. This is what they stipulated in the agreement. لا يجوز بالإجماع لعدم العرف فيه. This will not be permissible by complete consensus, because there's no ta'amul in this, there's no urf in this, there's no common practice of this, that the landowner must do his own work when it comes to harvesting. Okay?
Okay.
ولو أراد قصل القصيل أو جد الثمر بشرا والتقاط الرتب فذلك عليهما. Right? And if they intend, qas al-qasil means to cut or to uproot the shoots while it is still raw. Qasil refers to the unripened and the immature shoots. So if they intend to harvest the shoots in its raw form, أو جد الثمر, or to cut the fruit busran, right? Busra while it is still unripened, right? Busra, like you get busra dates, the yellow color, it's not yet the black color or the brown color. You see busra dates?
Okay.
Gee, so that it's just gotten wet. It hasn't actually ripened as yet. So if they want to cut it off in that state, والتقاط الرتب, or to cut the rutab, cut it in its rutab state, either busra when it's still a bit hard, or rutab when it's just become soft and moist, it hasn't yet turned like a yellowish color, hasn't yet become brown. فذلك عليهما, in that case, then they are both responsible for it. Why? لأنهما أنهيا العقد. So because in this case here, they both ended the transaction before the time. They decided to cut the crops early, not to wait for mature until they became matured. So because they've ended the contract mutually from their own side, they will both be responsible for those duties. لما أنوى على القصد وجدال بسرا. Excuse me, sorry. لأنهما أنهيا العقد لما عزم على القصد والجدال بسرا, because they both terminated the transaction once they both determined, azama, they both intended, they both are determined to harvest the crops immature and to cut the fruit in its unripe state. فصار كما بعد الإدراك, so it will be as if it has already reached maturity. In other words, the masai that applies for after maturity will apply to this now, because just like after maturity or after ripening, the transaction has come to an end. In this case here, they've ended it prematurely, so it will be as if it has come to an end. The same masala will apply there as well. Understood?
Yeah.
Anything? Did you understand? Any questions?
No, I'm done the same.
Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. May Allah accept our efforts, inshallah, grant us proper understanding, accept us with the hikmah of deen, and make it a means of ajr for us in fit darain, and that means another means of ahlak fit darain. Ameen ya rabbal alameen. Gee, so inshallah, I think tomorrow you can let me know, but I think we should continue inshallah tomorrow because we're quite a long way to go still. And there's only one term left.
Inshallah.
So maybe we should just continue while the Muzara is still fresh in our minds. Musaqat is there will be a lot of overlap between the two, so I think we should. I think we should continue for the last day. But you can let me know, inshallah, what you decide.
Inshallah, inshallah, we'll
Okay,
continue.
jazakallah.
Inshallah.
It's subhanallah wa bihamdihi subhanakallah wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.